I'm a little nervous. I'm going to run out of hard drive space, but I should be okay.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Okay. Sounds
We've
good.
done it before. Hey, patrons.
Hi, patrons.
We are finally episode 284 into the show, and we're finally tackling serial killers.
Yeah. Been avoiding it because, I mean, multiple reasons. One is it seemed like the hell of a topic. Two is I find serial killers to be, just mind-numbingly boring. And three is sifting through the speculative hypotheses of cognitive psychology that have muddied the water of what science could have done. It was a bit much. So,
yeah, it's exhausting.
Yeah, but all right. Oh, and I don't know if you saw this. I added ad segue ideas. So if you want at the very very top, and so we can glance at this. Are there any that strike you? We won't need all of them. I'm not planning on 8 ad breaks, but I just some that sort of occurred to me as I was writing this. I thought would be fun.
Yeah, I think that's great.
I like number 3 a lot.
Oh no, what's that? It's ads. Did I tell you for the other podcast, every year we do like last year we did a retelling of Christmas Carol, but we implanted Varg Vikernes from Burzum, and like had him we made him a shithead in it, and like having to learn his lessons, and like he was still a shithead. So like it didn't work out. So we just got to make fun of Varg Vikernes the whole time. But this year we're doing a Halloween special where it's a Scooby-Doo. It's called Ghoulie Ghoulie Ghoul, Where Are You? And it is the Misfits, and they have to solve a Scooby-Doo mystery. And it's the best part is Doyle from the Misfits, the guitar player that's like the big hulking guy, is going to be essentially the Scooby-Doo in it, and it's going to end up with I won't spoil it too much, but it's going to end up in an intervention. And so I get to do Danzig's voice the whole time, which is great.
This sounds
like it's so fun.
This sounds like fantasy football meets punk meets like horror, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, and the whole time, like basically they're just a bunch of characters, and like so we are Danzig's character is just like the whole time he's just like, oh, I don't like it. Like, that's it the whole time. That's just how he talks. That's and then like my buddy Mikey just like made Jerry Only, the bass player, just the character where he's just like some Long Island, like Brooklyn. He's very much so like, dude, I gotta go get this, like I gotta go play music. I can't stop playing music with the Skulls and a Gabagool. Like he's like that's Jerry Only's entire character.
Isn't it Jerry Lonely?
Jerry Lonely, yes, it's Jerry Lonely. I just need a good meatball sub.
All right. Well, it is late there. Let's
do it.
Yeah, let's kick this show off. Let's make this happen. All right. Are you all ready? Good to go?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. I think I'm good. All right. 3, 2, 1, go. Welcome to Why We Do What We Do. I am your investigator host, Abraham.
Ooh, and I am your profiler host, Shane.
Excellent. We are a psychology podcast, and we are in the penultimate, the second to last, the penultimate spooky themed episode for this year's Halloween Why We Do Palooza.
And don't worry, we're gonna keep doing this every year forever. So you're gonna get so many spooky episodes, but it's always sad to see them go. But this one will be fun. I think this one will be a good one.
And we mean forever, because when and if one of us dies, then we'll come back from the grave and keep doing it.
That's the goal. Yeah,
just this part.
Or we're going to hand it off to somebody who looks enough like us, or maybe clones. I don't know. We'll get into cloning one day, and that'll be great. And we'll just continue the legacy forever.
Maybe we're going to become like bionic people, where we're half robot and half organic material, and we just keep living indefinitely.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that.
All right. Today, at least the day that this is published, is I guess, October 19th. And there are some notable holidays on October 19th. For one, it is Gin and Tonic Day.
Ugh, no thanks.
Also, and I thought this was very coincidental that this happens to also be Evaluate Your Life Day. So
That's great.
Yeah, you're sipping that gin and tonic and maybe think, was this a good idea?
Yeah,
Um,
you're very you're contemplative today as a result of your
that's
gin
right.
and tonic.
Yeah. Also, Seafood Bisque Day, which I think goes
Huh?
hand in hand with Evaluate Your Life Day.
Sure.
And also somehow, and maybe this is related, but Hagfish Day. So your hagfish
Weird.
seafood. And Global Dignity Day. So I'm not sure
Oh,
how to
good.
mesh those all together, but you got some hagfish in your seafood bisque, drinking gin and tonic, and a really good opportunity to reflect and evaluate your life. Hopefully, walk away with some dignity still.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, hopefully. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're in a place where you are rethinking your life over a hagfish seafood bisque with a gin and tonic, then you have sunk to a whole different level.
Not to be judgmental, people have their thing. Maybe that's your thing.
Yeah, I mean, if that's your thing, that's a very specific thing. Is all we're saying.
It is oddly specific, but there's a lot of people in the world. Odds are somebody's thing.
Yeah,
Odds that they're our listener nearly zero, but
yeah.
that's okay.
So our listener handing it to somebody, maybe, I don't know. We'll see.
There you go.
If we get feedback, we'll let you know.
Absolutely. Please share. I'd be happy to know. Speaking of sharing, if you'd like to support our show and what we do here, you can share us. You can also join us on Patreon. You can leave us a rating and review. You can buy some merch. You can. Oh, I had a good one. I forgot what it was. I'm gonna make one up. Beep. You can monogram why we do what we do on your bath towels.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
I mean, they're simple. They're simple enough letters.
it's true. We support all of it. Anything you want to do. I'll talk more about that at the end of our episode, though. Okay, we haven't actually told anybody what we're talking about, have we? Or have we?
No, we haven't really. No.
Okay,
We
I
just
don't think
said
we mentioned it.
spooky.
Yeah, it's spooky. It's psychology. We're talking about the thing that I think there's a million podcasts, TV shows, movies. It's probably the most popular topic for all of media, and that is serial killers. I can say
Yeah,
things.
yeah. You can say words. You're good with words. That's the whole thing with the word format that we've got.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're talking about serial killers, and literally people make their entire careers talking about this. This is
they
a
do.
thing that people do. I mean, straight up, like there are people that make money forever living off of Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes, and so we're not going to solve literally any of it in this 45 to 1 hour discussion that we're going to have. Maybe an hour 30, but who knows. But this is not going to be the podcast for that, because I mean, I think we could probably get out in front of it. We don't really care about serial killers.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think for both of us, I mean, you can speak for yourself, but it's not a topic that's ever really interested me very thoroughly. Like I don't necessarily explicitly avoid all of it, and I feel like I'm aware of the serial killers. I actually do have a like true murder podcast that's in my regular rotation. That is the one I look forward to the least every week.
Yeah.
So there's that. But yeah, so I mean it's just not my bag. But
I mean,
it is like a psychology thing.
Yeah, and it's worth talking about. I mean,
It
it
is.
is in the zeitgeist, and I mean, I have a podcast I listen to that talks about it too, and what interests me is more of the context around the people, and not necessarily the people themselves. Like, there are some really interesting ones that have to do with like death cults and stuff, but that's more like it's not the crime itself; it's the death cult that makes me want to listen. So
I get that. That makes
yeah,
sense to me.
yeah.
All right. Well, so I think there is an important and beep, there is an important, yeah, an important con. There's an important content warning. We are going to be talking about all kinds of things that relate to serial killers. So this might not, if that's something that is unpleasant for you to hear about, to listen to descriptions of what people have done in that are serial killers, this might not be the episode for you. If you have young ones around, you don't want them hearing these descriptions of violence. Again, it's not terribly graphic in this discussion, but we are talking about some topics that might be triggering for some people. So be cautious moving forward. If that's something you're okay with hearing, then I think you'll enjoy this, and if not, then you might sit this one out.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. So, yeah, I mean, with that being said, we are going to talk about what a serial killer is, some scary stuff about serial killers, list a few serial killers. There are many, many, many,
Many.
and mention some little known serial killers and briefly touch on the why. Why do they do what they do? And I want to be really clear about that. Why do they do what they do? Because we do not do this thing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. This is not a why we do why what we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. This
We
is not an inclusive thing.
Yeah, I do tend to, when we talk about these topics, I like the we, because I like talking about humans, but there are certain things that I'm okay with more othering us humans into groups, and I'm okay with othering the serial killers away from the rest of us.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Agreed. 100%.
Yeah. And not to say that it's not worth understanding why they do what they do. But it's hard for me to say this is why we do these things and have that refer to me when I'm talking about, or anybody who listens to this, and be talking about serial killers. And not to say that they're like not humans, but we're just not in the same category in an important
It's
way.
okay. I would say it like this. Like when you go see a comedian, like typically a stand-up comedian will share stories that are relatable.
Yeah.
Like they will share stories that you can relate to, and that's part of why they're funny. This is
Fair.
a situation where this is not relatable.
Hopefully.
Like there's never been a time where I wanted to relate to Ed Kemper. So like I just kind of like think about that, and you're like, all right, this is not something that I can understand or wrap my head around in terms of like a relatable, livable experience.
Yeah, maybe for some people who are listening, it is. If so, I would encourage you to go see a psychologist.
Yes, yeah, go get some therapy, please.
Yep. Don't chain them up in your basement, but just normal psychology meetings.
Yeah, yeah. Standard fare.
All right, but we've been at this long enough. It's probably time that we do get into defining our terms and our topic at hand. And so I went through several layers of my own investigating here to really dig down and find a description, because this has changed over time. And we'll talk about that. Now, according to the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation, otherwise known
Sounds
as
fancy.
Yeah, otherwise known as the FBI. In an undated report, I couldn't find, there was no date of publication of this report. The latest date that I found in the document referencing something else was 2007. So I'm guessing this was within the last 10 to 15 years. Apparently, though, this report was by Robert Mueller, making me think it was maybe more recent than that. Through a painstakingly detailed rationale for their definition. I'm talking pages of description of why they included what they did include and why they didn't include other things.
Yeah. Okay.
The definition of a serial killer, and actually what they call this is a serial murderer. A serial murder, not serial murderer right now. We're talking about serial murder. This is the unlawful killing of two or more victims by the same offender or offenders in separate events. So that is a serial murder. A serial killer then is, or serial murderer must be one or more people who commits those acts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I follow you. I follow that a little bit.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Now,
sorry, go ahead.
Okay, no worries. So there used to be no distinction between serial killer and mass murder. Or serial killer and mass murder. I'm gonna start that over. Beep. There used to be no distinction between serial killer and mass murder until surprisingly recently. They also tried out traveling lust murderer. Doesn't have the same, it doesn't really like roll off the tongue like many of these other ones. The term serial homicide, the serial being a unique ad there, I guess, maybe. And that's often credited to FBI Special Agent Robert Ressler in 1974 during a lecture to a police academy in which he noted that the patterned killings reminded him of, quote, serial adventures, end quote, from the short episodic Hollywood films and TV programs. So so for everybody knows, those serial, it's essentially like serial shows are just episodic, like there's like usually they're an episode that will have like kind of a short story that's tied up towards the end. Like comic books used to be like that, where you get like one issue and it's like a serial where it's like multiple stories that are linked together, but there's usually a nice clean buttoned up ending at the end of every episode or issue or whatever it is.
Yeah, so that format of storytelling was the inspiration for using the description of that format for describing or for applying that to these repeated offenses, these murders that
Yeah.
were taking place. And so that's kind of how that term got started. So that's more or less settled. Nope.
Yeah, sure. Nope. Ha
Oh, that sorry, you took that one.
No, you're good. Yeah, so it's
all
your
right.
turn. Yeah, you can do that. There's some dispute.
Cool. All right. Boop. So there is actually some dispute. Author Anne Rule postulated that LAP detective Pierce Brooks, although I couldn't find the exact quote or information to confirm this, she postulated um, beep. She postulated that Pierce Brooks instead was the first to coin the term serial murderer or serial killer or serial homicide.
Yeah, and still other literature sleuths have found the term serial murderer used in the 1966 book, The Meaning of Murder by John Brophy, or serial murderer in the 1950 book with the inauspicious title, quote, The Complete Detective, being the life and strange and exciting cases of Raymond Schindler, Master Detective, quote, by Richard Hughes.
Yeah.
Worst title. That's a long title.
Yep. So we're basically moving back in time. So we had our earliest one was potentially the term was coined in 1974. Then we have some undated one with no cited sources that was sometime before that. Then we have a 1966 book, then a 1950 book, or we have Serienmörder. I don't know if I did that any justice, which is German for serial murderer. In the article, Die Düsseldorfer Sexual Verbrechen.
It's
For
pretty good.
Brachen, thank you, which is German for the Dusseldorf sex crimes by Peter Curtin. And this was all the way back in 1930. So we did have a term that existed for this as far back as 1930, albeit in German for the first time.
Also, probably burned, knowing the history of what happened pretty soon after 1930. Now, of course,
good point.
People killing other people repeatedly and spread out over time predates recorded human history. Genghis Khan was functionally a serial killer, and most politicians throughout history were probably also serial killers. Vampires are definitely serial killers, but the term is a fairly new term to describe this phenomenon.
Right. And now important here is notice that the definition provided before, like the one that we got from the FBI, it does not imply motive. Now, interestingly, motive has been used as a part of the definition in different points in time, but it made the definition very complex and unlikely, unnecessarily exclusionary for certain types of what you might otherwise call a serial murder or serial murderer. So for clarity, just talking about the difference between the serial killings and mass killings, mass murderers, these are distinct in that the killing spree for a mass murderer occurs all within a brief window of time, often with one devastating weapon, such as an automatic rifle or a bomb. And so in a very brief window, they kill a lot of people versus a serial killer, which again, these are separate, spread out events.
Right. Now, serial killers or serial murderers are real, and we know that. There's nothing to dispute there. And there have been many of them. And we're going to talk about some stats about this. Now, one of the things that's really interesting about this is that serial killer celebrity status overshadows the victims while glorifying the killer. And that's actually one of our biggest gripes with even talking about serial killers, is that so many of the circumstances or so many of the killers tend to get the limelight. They get all the fame and the discussions, and they're the ones that get the books and the interviews and all that stuff. And it really kind of leaves the victims in a place where every single time a story comes up, those folks get victimized.
Yeah. Justin, please insert some scary swelling music right as Shane was talking about that. And then I'm coming in with Shane, look out behind you, it's ads.
Ah!
All right.
So good.
All right, we are on to stats.
Scary stuff.
Okay. Where the fuck am I in my notes? There we go. Got it. All right, let's see here. Okay, yes. So as we were just saying, one of the problems with talking about serial killers is this over glorification of the person who committed the crimes, and too little attention being paid to the victims of those crimes. I've even heard from some recent authors of true crime books deliberately spending more time talking about the names of the victims, the family of the victims, and trying to avoid using the killer's name at all for that
Mhm.
specific reason. And I've heard a little bit of back and forth on authors discussing whether they think that it is potentially problematic to not make that person's crimes known by attributing them to that person, but also then realizing, the importance of not missing an opportunity to essentially try and make sure we recognize the victim who was, the unwitting contributor to this killer's fame.
Yeah, I think if you get a chance, one book I would recommend on this is a book called "I'll Be Gone in the Dark," which actually
Mm.
helped capture the Green River Killer,
Oh,
or the Golden State Killer. I'm sorry, the
okay.
Golden State Killer,
Got it.
and it was a really great read that discussed and spent time with the victims and like in the investigation process, not necessarily about the person themselves. So that was, I think a really good example of how to kind of focus on the more important parts of the story.
Yeah, very important catch. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some scary stuff about serial killers, including some amount of statistics and whatnot.
Yes. So here's the scary part of the episode, which is numbers.
Yeah,
Now,
and that's
now,
why it's scary.
stats. Now, an unsettling statistic from WorldAtlas.com and Discover Magazine reports that the FBI believes there are anywhere between 25 and 50 active serial killers in the U.S. at any given time. Horrifying. I don't like that. That's it.
Well,
Almost one per state.
yeah, I was just about to say every other state or one per state, although there tend to be more active, I guess, in areas where there are more people and more opportunity and more fostering of that type of thing, which we'll sort of get to.
Yeah.
An important thing also is the number of serial killers exploded in the 1950s. I mean, it went from very, very few to a lot, just rocketing upward over the decades, hitting its peak in the 1980s with nearly 800 active serial killers in the United States. Now,
Ugh.
I know. Important some considerations around this. One is that it's possible that the number is influenced by creating that definition, which came on late, like we're talking the 1970s, right? So
Mhm.
having that definition may have been part of it, and that may have also come along with better record keeping. It may have come along with better analysis and or better awareness of, and therefore classification of these incidents. It could have been improved data analysis as we had better record keeping, and there being, oh, okay. Boop. And those things contributing to what appeared to be more of a surge than would have been indicated if we'd had all those systems in place beforehand. Maybe. It also
Right.
could be the case that there just was a massive surge in serial killers. Like it could
Right.
be, or it could be a mixture of those two things. We had a coupling of both an increase in serial killer activity and an increase in our ability to track and record those events as they took place.
Well, I think another part of that too is just advances in technology that allow us to investigate crimes and tie crimes together better. Because a lot of times, what
Good
might have
point.
happened is you might have had multiple murderers that were never linked together because motives were different and all that. So you end up in a space where somebody who would change up their motive multiple
Mm,
times or their means to do it could get away, and it would just look like singular murders. When the truth is, they probably could have been the same person.
yeah, good point.
A lot of stuff, a lot of contributing factors. Now,
Yeah.
although the number of serial killers in the US has plummeted since the 1980s, it may be because first, people are much more cautious than they used to be. I mean, the
Yeah.
fact that seatbelts are required and you're not allowed to smoke inside is an indicator enough that people have moved into a more safe space in
Right.
general. People are more concerned with their well-being. And there are far fewer easy victims as a
Yeah.
result of this like heightened caution.
Exactly right. Another one is detectives. Boop. Another one might be because of detectives. There has been, as you were mentioning, a proliferation of advanced technology, cameras, and law enforcement that has gotten so sophisticated that it is becoming increasingly impossible to evade capture long enough to become a serial killer. So someone who kills once who might kill again just doesn't remain uncaught for long enough that or they are caught soon enough, I guess is the better way to say this. Too many negatives in there. They're caught soon enough that they could not go on to be a spree killer of some sort.
Absolutely. That makes sense. And those who would have been serial killers have instead become mass murderers because of the efficiency and ease. So what's indicated by the skyrocketing number of mass shootings sponsored by the NRA, not sponsored by, but I mean, the motive, the opportunity, the means, all that stuff. That's what we mean by the NRA kind of being the what's the word I'm looking for? It's not sponsor, but it is kind of like the cause, maybe. No, there's another word for it. I'm kind of
culpable.
Yeah, there's a lot of words that essentially say the NRA is the reason for it. But essentially, just for mass killers, it's become easier to take out a lot of people in a really short amount of time, so they don't get classified under that current definition.
Yeah. And so for legal reasons, we can't say that the NRA is directly responsible for. What we're going to say is they made it a lot easier, and they're fighting for laws that make it a lot easier to do something like get a rifle and kill a lot of people. And they're not the only ones. There are a lot of groups. And actually the NRA is one of the tamer groups that are out there trying to promote the access to violent weaponry and therefore massive amounts of harm. And they all know who they are, and you guys are doing your thing. And
yeah.
And all we're really saying is that that's what is happening, and take that as you will.
Yeah, there are data to suggest that is a thing that's going on right now.
We have some myths that we can bust in these statistics if you'd like.
I love mything busting. That's not a word. That was not a thing. I'm so tired. I've been, just so for everybody who's like listening, I have been talking for the last 4.5 hours, so my mouth does not work right now.
Shane has so many podcasts.
What I meant to say was I love myth busting is what I meant to say.
I like mything busting too.
Mything busting is fine.
All right. So the 20-something white male serial killer, according to one source, as of 2010, 51.7% of serial killers are white, 39.8% are black, and these two groups comprise over 90% of all offenders. So digging into the other stats seems like just a lot of numbers to throw at you that you wouldn't remember anyway.
Right.
As far as other things about this being a 20-something white male, again, we just talked about race. We can also talk about that male part. Around the world, 88.6% of serial killers are men, 11.4% are women. With the most female distribution, the highest proportion of equal distribution of serial killing activities was all the way back in the early 1900s, when women comprised over a third at 37.5% of the serial killers.
Yeah. Interesting stuff.
I guess officially, yeah. Yeah. Finally, the numbers in the US are very similar. So a lot of these were global statistics. And the United States, it is, as I said, similar. It does slightly skew more toward male. Thus, international only... Thus, international statistics are, it's a little more even. I mean, not a lot. It's 83, almost 84% male and 16% female.
Yeah. Now, 80% reported their motive as being for the enjoyment, financial gain, or anger. And about 20 to 21% have a military background, which means that 80% don't.
That actually surprised me. I was expecting that to be higher. But yeah. And so, yeah, the enjoyment, financial gain, or anger, enjoyment was actually the highest, but between those three motives, they comprised 80% of the motives that were provided. And we'll talk more about why serial killers got their inspiration, if you will. Things that contributed to those types of decisions a bit. We'll get there. Anyway, important to note, this was another sort of, to me, this was one of the mind-blowing facts of the podcast. The U.S., with respect to serial killers, outperforms every other country so disproportionately, and outperforms is not a great choice of words.
No.
Outnumbers other countries.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, but I mean, I guess, well, to be fair, I will say, like, part of American culture would say that we outperform. So like I
true.
think that tracks with the current we're number one. So
number one in many things, one of them this. So anyway, they exceed all other countries, every other country so disproportionately. I don't know whether to laugh or cry about it. So the US has recorded over 3,000 serial killers in our history. Okay, over 3,000.
Wild.
The next highest country, the next highest after America with its over 3,000, is 166. And that is in another colonizer country, which is England. So
wild.
Between those two, we make up way over the bulk of serial killers that have ever been recorded in the world. Now, you can certainly look at this and say, maybe this is primarily just a tracking, like maybe we have really good detectives and really good tracking and really good data analysis. That might be true. Even with that, those numbers are shocking to me.
Yeah.
And so anyway.
I'm there with you, and I wonder how much of that is like a retroactive thing too. Like you know, for example, if the definition can be retroactively fit to, like, I don't know, let's say Billy the Kid. Like, technically Billy the Kid could be considered a serial killer because he killed enough people to do that, but it was also contextual because it was the Wild West and there were so many there was so much lawlessness back then. Like it's such a bizarre thing. So like I don't know if like a current definition should be fairly retroactively fit towards something like that. But
it's a very good point.
I don't know. I wonder if he's classified. We'd have to look that up.
Yeah. And so I am really curious. I don't actually, there are definitely a lot of countries who would not want to report the numbers that they had.
We're number one.
Yeah.
We're number one.
They basically would say like, no, we've never had any serial killers, even though they may have had a lot. And again, maybe it's just our reporting. I don't know. It was just a very, very, very high number that shocked me.
It doesn't make any sense that England and Australia don't have more.
It does surprise me. I mean, Australia has outlawed most guns, so
but they started as an outlaw colony.
That's true. But at that time, also, like, you could be an outlaw for like looking sideways at royalty or being gay
for sure.
or like stealing bread to feed your family. So
yeah. I mean, it's you're right. It wasn't
for
really
working on Sunday.
There's people that were like, man, it was really, Australia was just started by a bunch of people that didn't mind spiders.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Like, spiders didn't scare them.
The spider lover people.
Yeah. Now, an interesting stat that came out of this. We talked about this before the show, and this was surprising to me. Gunshots are actually the most common method serial killers used by 43%, with strangulation being the next highest at only 21.7%. So I was actually pretty shocked by that. I mean, maybe I'm wondering how current that is compared to like historically, where maybe guns are easier to access now. I just don't know. But that was an interesting stat to me.
I'm forgetting now which source I got that from, because I basically found I pulled some from the FBI, but there was some other like academic report that had a lot of statistics in it, and I sort of pulled where I found interesting stats from either one. So I mean, and that's not to say like I was ignoring some stats from one and taking from the other. It was that they reported on different things, and so I found the ones I found interesting and pulled them in. So, okay, so. As we mentioned, the rate of serial killers has been decreasing in the United States, and I'd bet that you'd love to know to what that means and what it's been decreasing to. But first, this episode brought to you by ads.
So good.
Thank you. All right, let's go back to. I have to scroll up to find it. Maybe my segue idea wasn't very good. Okay, I found it. Beep. Okay, so we were just talking about the fact that the serial killers we've talked about lots of things, weapons and methods of killing, but also that serial killers, at least the rates of serial killing, have been on the decrease. Now, according to known statistics, This is from 2 years ago, so things could have changed. But according to known statistics, the United States actually had 0 victims of serial killers recorded as of from 2017 to 2019. So those 3 years,
Whoa.
yeah, we actually had 0 victims of serial killers reported. Now, important caveat: there were definitely people who died, and there were people who were murdered, and it is entirely possible that in the future we will discover that some of the people who were murdered were part of a serial killer's ongoing activity, and we just didn't know at the time. So
Right.
those numbers very likely could, or I don't know if likely, but they very well, it's possible that they could change. We just don't know. But
Right.
again, more than twice as many, thinking about going back to this idea of mass shootings, there have been more than twice as many mass shootings in the United States than every other country on earth put together. More than twice as many.
Yeah, that's really bad.
So that could be the other reason that there's 0 victims of serial killers, because there is a just ballooning number of victims of mass murderers who are shooting up the place.
Yeah.
And I also found this stat, which I thought was interesting, is that there have been more victims of gun violence, more deaths attributable to gun violence in the United States than the number of U.S. soldiers that have ever died in any conflict since the American War for Independence in 1775.
I mean, that is just astounding.
Do with that what you will.
Yeah. Wild. That is a wild number.
Yeah. That's just so many.
It's just sad.
Senseless.
Yeah. So surprise, this is a podcast about banning guns. Now,
doing something about it.
We got to do something about it. Now, although the majority of serial killers are caught, a mathematical model presented data suggesting that about 1% might have never been caught, resulting in up to 60 additional victims. So there is a little bit of that kind of, it's not a perfect system, because there are some folks that still get away with it.
Yeah, although now this was a little bit difficult to read. I found these statistics and they were reporting like through all their methods and everything. But essentially what they came out with was that they believed that 99% of serial killers are eventually discovered or caught. And so that I thought was encouraging. I would have actually thought that it was a higher percent that ended up not being caught. And I know 1,000 people who listen just said the Zodiac killer. And yes, that was one of the 1%.
Yeah.
So there are those that never get caught. According to this person's math, almost all of them do. So that's right. That's a thing.
Okay. All right. So I think with that being said, that actually it leads really well into the idea that there's some not so scary stuff about serial killers, right? So we can share some information about serial killers to kind of demystify them.
Yeah, and just this is, I guess, some kind of fun stuff, if you will. I couldn't find any actual numbers, but there are at least dozens of movies, books, comic books, TV shows, other media, podcasts about serial killers specifically. Not even just murderers or mass murderers, but serial killers specifically. Just dozens of them. So if that's your bag, you could spend the rest of your life consuming nothing but media about serial killers, and you will never run out of new things to consume.
That's true. That's accurate. The band The Killers from Las Vegas are, as far as we know, not actual killers. So that's a good thing.
That is a good thing. Only 1% or fewer of all murders are done by serial killers. The vast majority are one-off or mass murder type killings. Comforting,
I guess. It sounds fine. Most, but not all, serial killers. Most, but not all serial killers stay local. They stay pretty close to their geographical location, as far as we know, and they are very unlikely to travel very far. So if you start experiencing or noticing a pattern of behavior occurring in your neighborhood, then maybe you're part of that percentage that's out there.
Yikes. And yes, everybody is yelling Ted Bundy, who is familiar with these. And yes, he is one of those, not all, who did travel a lot. Now, we said pretty close to their geographical location. We didn't say traveled outside of the United States. Probably some did. Ted Bundy traveled within the United States, but most people are like like they're in their county a lot of the time.
Yeah. They're in their county or their city or
yeah. Ted Bundy he traveled a lot. Many murders across the United States. Part of what took him a while to catch him. So
yeah. Now, with that being said, we should talk about some myths.
Even more myths.
More myths. So first, most serial kills. Most serial killers are dysfunctional, antisocial weirdos. That is wrong. Part of what makes them capable of evading capture is their ability to blend in and appear normal. Many of them have some kind of, they're very charming, and Ted Bundy is one of those examples. He's a very charming person, very personable, and very easy to blend in. BTK is another example. He was a community member, and he was active in the community, and he got away with it for many, many years.
Yep. We're going to get into some famous ones, and some of them were like well respected in their profession. They were well known. So the idea that most of them, now that's not to say that some of them aren't these weird, dysfunctional, antisocial weirdos. That definitely occurred. But most of them are really good at, most of them you're not going to notice for anything that they do just in their normal behavior.
Right.
Another myth is that most serial killers are mentally ill or evil geniuses. No, this is not the case.
No.
They might lack empathy. They might even be considered sociopaths, but most of them do not suffer like hallucinations or hear voices or otherwise have some other diagnosable mental health condition. It's most of them, like they might be considered in this like borderline personality like group or this antisocial group, this sociopath group, but we're not dealing with a lot of people who have like schizophrenia. Actually, people with schizophrenia are much more likely to be the victims of violence than the perpetrators of it. Now, again, everybody's saying like, yes, there have been people who had schizophrenia who were also violent, but the majority of them, they're again more likely to be victims than perpetrators, and the majority of people who are serial killers do not have some of these mental health conditions.
Yeah. And speaking of, mental intelligence type of stuff, the evil genius kind of myth is also entirely an artificial Hollywood creation. It is not, most serial killers are not these like evil geniuses that are plotting and planning and doing all that stuff. Some of them are, but not all of them. Most of them are not. Of the ones that were tested,
small handful.
A very small handful, yeah. Of the ones that were tested, the average IQ was about 94.5. Which is exceedingly average. And there are, of course, those extremes, but the majority are just average intelligence, just people who just were kind of opportunists more than anything.
Yep. Another one is this. Okay. So the idea that serial killers have 3 names, John Wayne Gacy and all, that sort of thing. This is actually not wrong. It's just misguided, because almost everybody in the United States has 3 names. So you throw a dart into a crowd, you're going to hit somebody with 3 names 99 times out of 100. So that's just, I think people have talked about this idea of like, the serial killers have 3 names. I'm like, everybody has 3 names. It's like saying the serial killers have a face. I'm like, yep, they sure do.
They sure do. I mean, I have 3 names. Are you calling me a serial killer?
Yes.
Yeah, that's scary. I don't like that. I don't like that at all.
Just kidding. No, Shane is very gentle and arguably a leaning hardcore pacifist.
Yes, 100%.
It is not time for an ad break, is it? Not quite. Okay, cool.
We got a few more minutes.
Yeah. Beep. Well, everybody probably wants to hear, I would guess, some world famous serial killers. So we'll go through a quick list really fast. These I kind of put in a little bit of chronological order ish, sort of. The first one I'm gonna say is Jack the Ripper.
Speaking of 3 names,
the middle name of was active in London circa the 1880s or thereabouts, was never positively ID'd, killed, as far as we know, 5 people. At least 5 murders are attributed to Jack the Ripper.
And was really made famous because of how gruesome they were.
Yes.
Like that was a big part of it. Now, Jeffrey Dahmer was in the 1980s. He's from the Milwaukee in the U.S. and he was arrested in 1991, and he had 17 murders attributed to him.
Harold Shipman. This is not one I had heard about before, I don't think, but Harold was also called Dr. Death, was active from the 1970s all the way to 1998. Also working in London, convicted in the year 2000, believed to have killed at least 250 people. So as a doctor was killing patients, and not in the like Kevorkian empathetic, like try to end your pain style killings, but in the like malicious killing people. The reason he was actually caught apparently was because he then tried to write himself into the will of one of his wealthier victims, and the granddaughter was like, what? No.
Yeah, that's weird.
My grandma is not like willing her wealth to some random doctor who oversaw her care in the hospital. So
yeah,
that was one of the ways in which he was caught.
Weird, wild stuff. There was John Wayne Gacy in the U.S. circa the 1970s. He killed about or around 33 people.
Yep, 33 confirmed, probably more.
Yeah.
H.H. Holmes, famous one in Chicago, United States, active circa the 1890s at least. There is there's a range in which they think he probably is responsible for a lot more. He was convicted and hung because that's what they did back then, pretty quickly. He killed at least 30 people.
Yeah, and that story is kind of wild. Yeah. There's Pedro Lopez in Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru in the 1970s until, I don't know, was released from prison in 1998 and disappeared, and was supposedly had killed over 300 people.
Yeah. So we don't know where he is. He's old at this point, but had a lot of notches on his belt. So that's unfortunate. Possibly not alive. We're not clear. All right. The last one here, again, these are sort of the top, what did I say, 7-ish? Yeah.
Yeah, like more like well-known ones that you've probably heard of that you can find a lot of resources on.
Yeah. So the last one here is, and I put this at the end for a reason, Ted Bundy. The United States, all over the place, in many different locations, mostly active in the 1970s. He was he was executed via the electric chair in 1989 and was responsible for at least 25 deaths.
Yeah, he rode the lightning.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a wild euphemism for that, by the way. Like language is so great. I love language so much. Now, it's worth talking about. So people know about those because of their notoriety and their celebrity, but there were little known serial killers that are worth talking about, or at least mentioning in this context. So the first one is the Long Island serial killer in New York from 1996 to 2009, was never caught, killed about 11 people. That is confirmed at the moment.
So might be still out there, might be living in a mansion in Florida, who knows.
Pronounced Long Island.
Yes, thank you.
They have to you have to be really clear about the long part. Long Island.
Long Island. Okay.
Yeah.
Another one, Israel Keys was a honorably discharged soldier. He apparently planted these kill kits around the United States and then would later travel around. He was active from 2009 to 2012, and he would dig up these kill kits, and he was apparently, his MO was to pick random targets. He ended up in Alaska is where he was caught, I believe. And although he picked random targets, it did seem like there was a slightly racist bent to his targets.
Shocking.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. There's Vicki Dawn Jackson in Texas, circa 2000 to 2001. Really only 3 months. She was a nurse who killed unruly patients with sneaky injections, and she was believed to kill about 20 people in that 3-month period.
Yeah, they noticed that she was the last person who visited them before they died, but yeah, she was given these like heavy doses of sedatives that would put them out. And this, again, these are not empathy killings. These are like, you made me mad by being rude.
Right, absolutely.
All right, here's one that kind of surprised me that I had not heard of. This is Lonnie David Franklin Jr. and
Four names,
yep. Mr. Jr. He was active in LA mostly from 1984 all the way to 2007. Now, he was scary and able to be active as long as he was. He kind of was called like a sleeper killer because there was a long period of inactivity, like 12 years or something.
Yeah.
But he mostly targeted people who he thought wouldn't be missed. And he wasn't
Mhm.
wrong, unfortunately, but that means homeless people, sex workers, um, people who were drug addicts, things like that. Now, he was only convicted of 10 murders, but they think that he was likely responsible for hundreds of deaths at least.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And then there's Salvatore Perone from Brooklyn, circa 2012, and targeted shopkeepers based on their race, and it was only convicted of 3, but believed to have killed more. So that's a whole thing too.
Yep. There was a larger than zero number of people who had race related motives.
I believe that. I believe that entirely because of some of the stuff that you hear. So,
all right. Speaking of motives, if you would like the perfect deodorant for catching a killer, here's an ad for you. All right. So we were just listing some of the famous serial killers. Now we'll get to the part where we do our best to wrap our heads around why. What were the motives, the inspirations, the mind of the serial killer, if you will.
Yeah. So this is the why they do what they do portion.
Right.
And really the answer is we don't know why in general. There's no definitive answer for why serial killers exist because it's so unique and complex and really dependent on that person in the context in which they're operating. So there is no good singular answer.
Yeah, there's a few hypotheses we're going to go over, but pretty much everywhere that I looked, and I imagine if I continued to look, I would expect to find similar discussions of this whole nature versus nurture thing that has been with us since the 1800s and just will not go away.
It will not.
It will not. No. So anyway, as far as the nature portion of it, what is the biology, the anatomy of violent tendencies? Is it, I guess the question is it nature? And the problem with that is it's a wrong-headed question, and we'll get to that.
Mhm.
But let's talk about some of the hypotheses that people have at least leveled at trying to understand the genetic portion of this.
So there is the killer or the warrior gene, which essentially is a defect of the MAOA or MAOA, not to be confused with the extinct flightless and wingless bird, the MOA. Nope, it's dumb. It is a dumb argument. Genes are not capable of programming specific complex chains of behavior that include planning, selecting a victim, choosing a fatal strategy, and then follow through. At best, one might be more emotionally reactive, maybe.
Yeah. This is not held up to sufficient scrutiny to be used even in, courts have tried to use it and some of them successfully, but this is not a strategy you hear about commonly enough because it is so weak sauce. And honestly, it is used more often than it should given how weak sauce it is.
Yeah. And given how much science we have to the contrary, like there's so much behavioral science that would suggest that genes do not do this. They just set you up with a system that you can engage in certain like I can blink because of my genetic code.
Yeah. The system is important.
The hardware.
Yeah. We're interested in parts of the system and how it relates to our other contextual parts of our evolution, if you will, over a lifetime. But so an interesting thing here. So I'm citing an author, Adrian Raine, who is citing someone else named Daryl Hill, because I couldn't find the original source. And the quote is, "It don't take anyone too smart to look at 3 generations of outlaws and see that there's a link of some kind. There's a pattern." End quote.
Huh. Okay.
Now, he's absolutely correct. It does not take a smart person to do that. It does take the other type of person to extrapolate that from that one time that happened. I'm assuming he also believes that if you own a shoe factory, for example, that it is a genetically heritable trait to own a shoe factory when that family passes ownership from one generation to the next more than once.
I have to say, I'm very interested in the fact that you picked the shoe factory as the example for that. Like that's such a very specific thing.
You know what? Actually, the thing that occurred to me, and I don't know why, but it's from the movie Jumanji. just popped into my head about like I think it's William Parrish and his like son, and so he owns the shoe factory, and I think I don't even know if there was any discussion about him eventually running the shoe factory, but that was like the thing that I thought of for some reason.
That makes me so happy. I love the like relational frames that you have. Like they make me so happy. Like the stuff you come up with is so great. Now the other one, the XYY super male, when we talk about the gender and sexuality and nostalgia episodes, go listen to those to kind of get an idea of what that means. The super male is linked to and believed to be linked to increased violence. There is literally no evidence for this. So as far as chromosomes go, incorrect hypothesis, doesn't work.
Yeah, it actually has resulted in some false attributes attributable, or I guess some false like suspicion cast on people just because they have that genetic makeup.
Right.
All right. So that's the nature hypothesis. So nurture. Okay. So not nurturing necessarily, but the experiences we get along the way, right? So let's take as an example an experience of brain damage.
Mm-hmm.
Does this contribute? Possibly. According to prison research, up to 87, which for those of you for whom math is tough, 87 is most, violent offenders in prison have a history of brain trauma. So said again, most violent offenders in prison have a history of brain trauma. This is self-reported, so take that with a grain of salt, but that still is a much higher percentage than you'd expect to find in other populations.
Yeah. Now, although a history of abuse or childhood trauma is not prevalent in 100% of serial killers, it is prevalent in almost all of them. Like there is a pretty big proportion of this. So, there is at least a correlation of this experience and then the result.
Right. Yeah, very common. Could it be due to lead exposure? We talked about this a little bit in our lead episode. Mm-hmm. Maybe. We don't have causal data. We do have shockingly close correlational data. I looked at a graph that overlaid the rates of lead exposure between 1940 and 1990 and the rates of violent crime across that same decade. And the two lines follow one another uncomfortably closely. Like they are like really sitting on top of each other for that duration. Total coincidence, maybe. Who knows? Just saying. It's out there.
I think and I'm glad that you said that. I'm glad that you said it's like it's a very close correlation, but it's still not causal data. So we just can't definitively say that it's this thing.
Yeah. Possibly related. Unclear.
Unclear. Now, Rain points out that in twin studies, 50% of the variance is explained by nature. So you've got a little bit of a variance just based on genetic factors.
Yeah. So, okay. Strictly speaking, he is correct. But actually, it's 100% genetic. The kicker is it's also 100% environment, because those two things are never, ever, 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 and just for good measure, never, ever separate from one another.
Right.
It is always genetics with the environment. You just can't. You can't have those two be separate.
Untangle them.
Yeah.
All you got. So for those of you who are unsure of that argument, just go read The Science of Consequences.
It's good. Yeah. There's a lot in there.
Now, the thing that we have to I
was like a Three Stooges moment.
Now, think about the three factors that detectives tend to look for: means, motive, and opportunity. Okay. Means being resources, motive being drive, and opportunity being the opportunity to do this thing. Almost everyone that has the means, particularly in the US, and the opportunity, every one of them has had that example, right? So they've had the means to kill somebody, they've had the opportunity to kill somebody, but where does motive come from? And that's the question that people try to figure out. Like, where is that part coming from? Genetic and environmental means, motive, and opportunity, learning history, and biological availability. That's what it comes down to. There is a learning history that drives a lot of this stuff. Just in general, as a general rule, we engage in behavior because there is a behavioral, there is a motivation that leads to all of our behaviors. It's there. It's very difficult to pin down for every single person.
And a complex learning history and context that occurs also.
Yes.
There's also a motive that some have suggested that people will do this for the fame. It's unclear if that is ever actually emotive. Many serial killers have enjoyed the spotlight while they had it, but it seems like it was rarely, if ever, the inspiring motive or circumstance that got them started. They just, I think it's for them a happy coincidence at the end, but worth noting, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So one last point before we get into some take-home points on this is that most pop psychologists or any of that stuff in the pop psych world have literally nothing useful to say, and that's a good general rule, but that's also really kind of a thing that we want to point out here. Some speculate fan fiction. I'm sorry, something speculative fan fiction. Some of
Yeah.
them.
No, the way that I think I read this, I was writing this to myself, was like something speculative fan fiction as a description of their
Okay,
hypothesis.
I got you. Like you're kind of like da 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 da. Yeah. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Beep, beep. So something speculative fan fiction about being rejected by their mothers and internalizing their fear of rejection and being triggered to rage by an impulse to defend themselves against their projection of their personal demons on the world around them. I mean, that's just kind of like just spitballing, but that's all you see kind of coming from the pop psych world.
Yeah, I actually only made up about 10% of that,
That's a
pulling
lot of
from
it.
things that I read from what people said. So 90% of that is things that people have actually said as their hypothesis for what gets a serial killer going.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the pop psych side of things.
Sure.
It's like the Magic 8 Ball of motives. You just kind of shake it and something will float to the surface, and they're like that.
Right. Well, and the thing is, everybody wants to understand it, right? Everybody wants to understand how people can do some things so gruesome. And the truth is it's probably much simpler than people explain it out to be. Like it's probably a lot less complicated than what that drivel that we just said out loud.
Yeah, I guess because behavior is complicated, and understanding the sort of language and verbal history and context that led someone to those decisions is complicated. But the mystical fare that we just untangled in the wild hypotheses of the pop psych world are even more complicated than that,
right?
And depend on a lot of creativity, I guess. So
yes, exactly.
Well, let's do some take homes here. I think we've talked more or less, about what serial killers are and the history of that term and some statistics for fun, about them. But, I think one of the things that I think just stood out to me in this episode is that, first of all, while there have been a lot of serial killers, they still only make up a very small proportion of violent crimes. And so I don't want to, I want to be mindful not to, again, over dramatize the killer, undershadow or overplay the significance of what they've done, and overshadow the victims, who we of course did not talk about. And I'm sorry about that. We probably should have, we touched on a lot of serial killers, so it would have been tough to capture a lot of those. But anyway, that's, I guess, one of my take home points.
Yeah, I think another one for me is just understanding that there are a complex set of circumstances that lead to somebody like ending up in this space. It could be a history of trauma. It could be, and it's really ultimately a combination of things, right? History of trauma, head injuries. It could be any number of things that are leading that person to engage in certain levels of behavior. And from what I've heard and what I've seen and what I've understood, many of the first opportunities and like the first times that it happens are kind of by accident. Like it's not usually like that. I've seen that a lot where it's just like an accidental thing happens and they're like, oh, this is not good because I like this, right? So like that's something that kind of happens too. And so again, every person is different and every circumstance is different. Every learning history is different. So to answer the why they do what they do, it's going to come down to the same answer that we always come up with is it depends.
Indeed. They do it for different reasons. Can hardly end on a better point than that, I think. I don't know, do you have any other take homes?
No, I was going to try to find some organizations to donate to. There's the National Organization of Parents of Murdered Children for the families and friends for those who have died by violence. So there is an organization that does exist, pomc.org. So it might be worth checking them out if you want to support victims of people who have had that experience. There are and we'll try to find maybe we'll link some different organizations into the show notes so that we can kind of do some good away from kind of the spotlight that goes on with the serial killers themselves.
I like that. That's awesome.
Yeah. I was thinking about that when it was like, it's hard because there's so many violent crimes, but I think at the very least there is something out there we can do to kind of combat the true crime machine that's out there right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap up quickly with some recommendations.
Recommendation.
All right. Although I do understand the problem with potentially associated certain recommendations with certain topics, know that the recommendations I give are almost always completely random. And in this case, definitely completely random.
Yes.
Not associated at all. It was just like, oh, I want to add recommendations. Here's a thing I have to recommend. So did not try to link these topics. So I am recommending, I had this just delicious yogurt. It was Culina plant-based.
Pants-based.
Yeah, pants-based. Yikes. Don't even want to think about that. What might be. Anyway, this is, I've never heard of it before. I think Culina is the brand. And it was really, really good. I mean, my expectations were low, but I was very impressed. So you might look around, see if you see that brand and give it a shot.
Did you have a particular flavor?
I did, actually. Thank you for asking. It was a pumpkin spice.
Oh, that sounds really good, actually.
Tis the season, and I thought I would try one, and I loved it. So,
I love that. A friend of mine made a butternut squash sausage, a vegan butternut squash sausage lasagna. And I'm gonna try to get the recipe for that because that sounds so good. And very, very fall. So I have a recommendation if you like scary, spooky things, but you also like stuff that's not too scary and too spooky.
yeah.
Marvel just put out a Werewolf by Night, which is like a special presentation of some of their characters, and I just gotta say, big fan.
Nice.
I love this version of Marvel that's just kind of just like they have stopped caring what everybody thinks and just doing whatever they want. They're like, oh, you like Guardians of the Galaxy? That's enough. That's the gateway drug for all the crazy stuff that we're about to do. And Werewolf by Night is absolutely that. It is essentially just an homage to like 50s and 60s horror movies. It's very B film. Like if you've seen Grindhouse.
Oh, yeah.
It reminds me, it's got that vibe where it's very campy and very over the top, except it's done in black and white, and it introduces some characters that are part of the Midnight Suns, which are part of like the supernatural, scary, kind of the darker part of the Marvel universe. And it has a werewolf in it, and it rules.
All right.
The cast is great in it. It's great cast, great special effects, awesome.
I will definitely go watch this.
Yes.
All right. If you have a yogurt or a special presentation movie / show thing you would like to tell us about, we'd love to hear about that. If we missed anything about serial killers, or you'd like to add something, or you'd like to take issue with the fact that we came down so hard on the pop psychologists and the over eager nature oriented people, then you should also reach out to us and let us know. But hey, if you also thought we did a great job, we like hearing that too.
Yeah.
I would like to specifically thank, in relation to our pets episode, we got this just really lovely email from a listener who sent us pictures of her pets that were just adorable.
Love that.
And I was very happy to receive those. So we like that kind of thing. You should send us pictures of your pets, or maybe your collection of weird horror serial killer things. Would be okay too. So let us know. But otherwise, if you would like to support the show, you can join us on Patreon. There you'll get access to all kinds of bonus stuff, like videos of us recording, ad-free content, early episodes, stuff like that. You can also pick up some merch. We have a lot now. Like we've got all kinds of stuff going on. So a big old store just waiting for customers. And
we're here. Come to our warehouse.
Yeah, we're here. You can also just tell a friend about us. You can leave us a rating and a review. Make sure you subscribe so you get upcoming episodes, that sort of thing. We're happy to have everyone join us who has joined us. And speaking of people who have already joined us and are already supporting us, I would like to say thank you to the wonderful Patreons that currently support us, and that includes pulling up list.
That includes this list of people, you who are watching this.
Yeah. That includes Amanda, Brad, the Daily BA, Joshua, Justin, Justine, Kelly, Kim, Kostia, Layla, Megan, Mike M, Mike T, Shauna, and Stephanie. Thank you all so much.
Yay! Love y'all.
Of course, we couldn't do that without you people who are out there listening in podcast reception world. So thank you for listening and joining us today. Thank you to my team of wonderful people: Justin, Selena, Kyle, Alan, our new team members Jess and Patrick, and of course Shane. Thank you for this rare Thursday night recording that we just
I know
did.
it's good stuff.
And so, yeah, I think if you just reach out to us for anything you've got, anything else that I'm missing, Shane.
Nope, I think that's it.
I think. Blah, 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 blah. All right. Beep. Then this is Abraham.
And this is Shane.
We're out.
See ya.
Cool. Pretty well.
I think that went good. I think that went real good.
Oh, real good. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, my dude. I'm gonna get rolling out of here, and it is late for you too. So you go.
Yep.
Do your
I'm gonna go take a shower.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah.
All right. I should say goodbye to our Patreon people. Bye, Patreon people.
Bye, patrons. Thank you for being here.